Oh, okay, so there we go. Oh, never mind. Okay, so I want to do another vlog. It's New Year. I'm going to try and be a bit more commitment. Let's go for 2 a month or fortnightly, depending on how that works out. Average wise, I don't know if I'll be that good, but let's try again. Not going to edit. It's going to be poorly lit, poor audio, like the last one, but this one's not a rant. No, not as aggressive. I'm not as worked up about it, but it's something that I thought was quite interesting. So, I use or have used in the past a lot of dating apps. I mean, let's be honest, Tinder. That's the big one. Bumble and everything in between. I'm sure there's a load of other stupid ones over the times that I've used. And initially when I was using them, I kind of put them on the same level as actually meeting someone, roughly. I mean, you know, I thought, same thing, you see them, they see you. Same thing as in person, you judge them for how they look, they judge you for how you look, and then bye-bye, conversation. As time's progressed, and definitely most recently, I've started to notice that I think that they are noticeably less effective and just make for worse interactions. Aside from the whole swiping thing to start the conversation, it detracts massively from what makes meeting someone for the first time fun. And that's something that I've realised recently as I've started to try and be more go out and meet people conversation wise than swipe to meet people conversation wise. I'm pretty extroverted as it is, so it's not one of those things where I can definitely see for people that have anxiety or social anxiety or just don't like those environments that it can be great for them to find people if they're not going to be those kind of people to go out there, make that first move, or, you know, maybe draw a bit more attention to themselves to get, you know, when they're out and about, to try and pull someone over, you know what I mean, not pull someone over, but to try and get themselves more known a bit. There are a lot of people out there that don't work like that, and I can understand massively for them why it would work. But the thing that's most noticeable, and I'll talk about what happened over the weekend just past. I was at a works party for the new year, and obviously, you know, blah, 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 serendipity and all first-time romance and all that stuff aside, the circumstance that came up was a drink was knocked out of my hand. I was then basically introduced to someone through what happened, because the person that knocked the drink out of my hand wanted me to meet her friend in the group. After I met her and started talking to her, and then we continued on through the night, the same thing happens as when you have a first conversation on Tinder. It's the same kind of first conversation there. How you do this, or you do this, blah, blah, blah. But because you have the environment around you, granted this was a social environment as a party, it was slightly different. It was a bit more, you know, fun. It was a funner environment. You get the social cues and the environment around you that kind of adds to it a lot more. You get to look someone when you're talking to them for the first time and really infer from how they react to you and how you react to them, you know, and they get to infer from how you react to them more about them and how much they're enjoying it, and the conversation flows better and it doesn't feel as forced. Like when you've got stuff around you that's happening, those kind of lulls in conversation and things like that are okay. Whereas when you just kind of enjoy just the few moments of silence between as you're going through and what you're talking about, and you get to have more fun because there's obviously the physical aspect to it where you're not just saying, oh, hello, blah, 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 where do you work? That slow back and forth between the two of just asking the questions, almost like an interview. You get to have more of a flow of conversation where other things can happen and you can both talk about what's happening in the abstract. And it feels so much more... It feels so much more natural in this environment. It feels so much more cleaner and more genuine, because like with Tinder, you're almost forced into the to have the conversation. You have to have the conversation back and forth. You can't just drop it. You can't just unmatch someone like just because it's a bit of a slow conversation. Normally it just kind of fizzles out, whereas when you have that in-person interaction, you can really get more of a feel for the conversation and more engagement with the person. And I genuinely think it makes for a much better first impression, because when you have those conversations with Tinder and then you meet them for the first time, you're in some kind of weird middle ground between they're a stranger and there's someone that you want to hang, like, that you know how to act around. So you meet them for the first time, but you've kind of worked out and like gone through all the standard conversation stuff that's not really that interesting, like, you know, the bad stuff, but can be fun if you're having a back and forth and it's quick, because that can be over in like 20 minutes when you're having a talk with someone in person, but it can take weeks or, you know, days or weeks to have those kind of conversations over Tinder because of the pace of it and the message setting and the distractions and, you know, those kind of things, which makes it seem really and then really different. And then so when you meet them for the first time in this environment, you kind of feel a bit like you don't know how to talk to them, you don't know what to say, because you kind of left from wherever your last Tinder conversation was, or your last dating app or text or whatever. And I think it makes the conversation feel a bit more awkward, because you don't have that genuine kind of the fun or the reason you've met or the interaction that happened or the chances and the circumstances that come up. You don't get to have that kind of back and forth and quick wit and the tone of the conversation that is kind of set on a weird tone where you don't get to really be yourself, because you've already kind of given them like a kind of digital digital like interface version of you. And I think it misrepresents both people, and both people just get a worse deal. You don't really get to see what it's like to talk and spend time with someone, and they don't really get to see what you're like to talk to or actually hang out with. So when you have the first date anyway, it's kind of taken aback. And also it makes it seems really suspicious, because obviously when you match with people on Tinder, you think about the previous interactions and stuff you had on Tinder, but when you put someone in, you know, in the real world, let's call it the real world for now, IRL, when you meet someone in a normal environment, you kind of can get rid of those your dispositions, your previous thought processes and beliefs that you think about. And I think it makes it just a lot better for the general balance of things. I also feel that you can feel more natural about leaving it. So, for example, on the night when we were out, the first time we interacted was probably about 9 o'clock, and then we both went off and did our own things throughout the night and ended up coming back to each other here and there for different parts. And you get to have just a lot more fun with that. Like, when you're on Tinder, you just do that conversation back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it feels like, especially if you're only talking to one person and they're only talking to you, it feels like you're stuck against each other for the conversation. Whereas on the night, you can be like, you know what, catch you later, and go have some fun by yourself, and then catch up with them later, or see them a bit later on. And I just think it makes and so I'm starting to think of the previous four times I've met a new person, it's been in person now. I'm trying to move away from the dating apps. And I feel like every single one of those times I have a much more enjoyable experience in going through that. And it feels much more better. Like, it feels like more consistent. Like, if it fizzles out on Tinder, it kind of feels a bit, ugh. Just a bit like, oh, great, that's kind of that. But when you meet someone in person and it kind of burns out, you kind of get more of a feel for it. You're like, yeah, I could see how, you know, you seemed a bit tense. I was a bit off. I wasn't engaged in the same way you were. It just feels more like you get a more complete picture. Whereas on Tinder, when they just stop messaging, you're just like, oh, okay, so we just stop this then? And it's not as closure giving. And that's just the main thing that I've recently noticed, that I feel like genuinely I've had a lot more enjoyment, especially in the most recent one. And I feel much more engaged, much closer to the person, even though we've only spoken for like 3 hours, or on and off over the course of 3 or 4 hours. I feel like I got to know that person loads more than I would do in weeks and weeks of Tinder. I feel like you can talk to someone for weeks on Tinder and it just isn't the same. And so I genuinely would say to people that I think to probably stay away from the dating apps in general and try to meet people in whatever the most comfortable environment for yourself is. For me, a party is always pretty good, like or an event or a bar or a night out. I'm not a massive night outer. Like, I normally get tired about 2 o'clock and go home. But I really like that kind of social buzz environment of just having loads of people around that are all doing their own things and kind of interacting one way or the other. And so normally that's what I try to do that's what I do to try and find the kind of people, because I want to meet someone that's in that kind of similar situation. And so that was just the main thing I wanted to kind of get off my chest. I thought I'll start with something I've been thinking about a bit, and I'll try and move forward and be a bit more tactical and more planned with my vlogs moving forward. But that was the main one I wanted to put across, that, you know, I think there actually is a problem with using dating apps, and I think they genuinely, not in a kind of they destroy the value of relationships, because I think that, you know, there are people that have met, and I know people that have been together for 3 years after using a dating app or Tinder to meet each other. I don't know why I'm not saying Tinder as if I'm going to get sued. I know people that have been together for 3 years after using Tinder, and people that genuinely do have like relationships. They stop and then they go on Tinder and they'll get a new relationship, and it does genuinely work for them because they're not those kind of social go-outy people. But I would still say, even if you're not that social person, trying to put yourself a bit more out there, even if it's a more discomforting in terms of like how you feel socially, I think the benefit in how it would help to start and move forward with a good relationship, or not even a good relationship, just any relationship with someone, I think it's a lot better to have that first time you see the person, be in person, to have that more physical, more direct interaction, because there's, you know, the body language, the tone, you know, the timing, you don't really get the same kind of timing and pace to the conversations, like, especially for making jokes, because humour is like one of the biggest things in relationships. It's hard to come across as funny on a dating app because the timing isn't there, and how they read it isn't there, and they don't read it the way you said it, or why not? Or, you know, if the tone can make a massive difference to how you say it. Like, if you say some things, they are a lot funnier if they're in a jokey tone, but at the same time, in a serious tone, can be really bad. And then if it's in a serious tone, can kind of fall like a lead balloon, as they say. And that's the major thing that I think should really need to change in terms of hoping that people could move forward with this. All right. Peace.